Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Vice President of Legal Advocacy for Chamber of Progress. It's a tech industry association that works to ensure that Americans benefit from technological leaps. Our corporate partners include companies like Google, Meta, and Twitter, but our partners don't get a vote or a veto over our positions. One of our organization's top priorities is to promote safe and healthy online communities, free of hate speech, hoaxes, and disinformation. That's why we strongly oppose this bill. It would tie the online services' hands when it comes to the fight against toxic and incendiary content. And I'd like to note that much harmful content that occurs online is not actually unlawful, as it would be required to be to fall under the exceptions to this bill, where providers would be able to remove it without the risk of liability. I'd like to provide you with just a few examples of how this bill will impact the dozen or more social media services that will be covered. First, the bill will cause social media services to be overrun with disinformation and conspiracy theories through its ban on what it calls viewpoint discrimination. This would hobble platforms' constitutional freedom to remove or downrank things like Russia's lies and propaganda about the war in Ukraine. It would allow any person who has accessed the internet from Georgia to file a lawsuit to effectively prohibit Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook from removing obviously false claims by claiming it discriminates against their views. In addition, the bill will make it easier for bad actors, scammers, spammers, to evade detection by forcing companies to provide a roadmap for their terms of service enforcement efforts. Online platforms support transparency, but requiring detailed disclosures about things like how algorithms work can actually just deliver to bad actors a playbook for how to get around these protection measures that service providers have in place. And then finally, I would say one other thing to really think about is the impact that this bill would have on important safety tools that social media providers make available to people who are, let's say, victims of domestic abuse, cyber stalking, or other harassment. These include things like mute and block functionality. The bill's definition of shadow banning includes these types of tools and would essentially render them impossible, or at very least very dangerous, since an individual would have to be notified if the visibility of their content was being limited because someone had chosen to mute or block them. For the safety of our online communities, we respectfully urge you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
All right, there's one question. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I have a technical question which gets to this issue on line 108 of the sharing and receiving expression in this state. I always turn off the location stuff. I'm not a tech person, but my question is, do all the platforms have the ability to determine where content was posted if there are jurisdictional questions like that, or would it be only if a person had that geographical aspect turned on? What I'm thinking through is just, would we have to litigate where these things are actually being posted and received, et cetera?
I think the ability of a platform to know where a user is in a particular moment of time tends to vary depending on where they may be and how the IP address, for example, gets assigned to that location. So it can be more challenging if a user is, for example, traveling and maybe using some unfamiliar Wi-Fi networks or that sort of thing. But I'd also say one of the problems, and I think many of you ask questions about this, It's not even relevant under the laws. This bill is currently drafted where the poster is, because it applies to anyone who might want to receive that post. And, certainly plaintiffs' lawyers would be able to find someone in Georgia who would likely be willing to be a plaintiff who says that they would have liked to have seen a particular piece of content.
Okay. And is it true or not true that right now the companies probably aren't retaining location data because there's no purpose to, correct?
I would say, while speech and Section 230 issues have been very popular issues in state assemblies around the country, privacy issues have been as well. And so companies are being regulated increasingly on how much information they collect about consumers and how long they retain it. And so I know there's a big push on companies to retain less and less, and also to not, if they need to retain information about where users, their audience may be, not to keep that information associated with an individual user in order to give greater privacy protection.
All right, thanks.